Our game is just about complete. The last thing we need to do is set up our main menu using the UI system in Unity. I've provided the artwork needed to develop a full-fledged menu system with animations and a progress bar. It's up to you to code the UI interactions. As a helpful hint, place the reference image in the scene and add some transparency to ensure the design is perfect when placing your elements. I'll see you in the challenge reviews. In this video, we are going to begin setting up our UI manager and creating the functionality for when we enter a cutscene that has a fading menu, we can choose to restart or quit. And we want to use one script that's going to act as a manager class to handle that behavior. So to get started, let's create an empty game object and call it UI manager. This is going to be responsible for all UI elements on screen, including our main menu that we're going to create soon. From here, let's create a new C# script, call it UI Manager. By now, you should be comfortable turning this into a singleton. So I want you to open up this script, create a singleton design, or create a singleton manager out of this UI Manager, and also create the two functions that we need. So we need a restart function, and we need a quit function. And I want you to research how to actually fill in those behaviors. So in the challenge review, we're going to create the singleton and we're going to fill in the functionality for restarting the game as well as the functionality for quitting the game. All right, I'll see you guys in the challenge review. In this challenge review, we're going to create our singleton for the UI manager and create the restart and quit functionality. First thing I need to do is I need to create my private static UI manager underscore instance. This variable is going to run along every class so we can access it from anywhere. To avoid being able to change that value, we want to create a property that's going to return that value. So UI manager instance, and we'll create a get here. And we're just going to check if the instance is null. So here, if underscore instance equals null, we want to log an error because we don't want more than one. This instance should never be null. If it's null, that means that it doesn't exist. So we want to stop the program because we need to make sure it exists. So if instance is null, then we're going to debug.logerror. It looks like my tooltip here has disappeared for some reason. I'm going to save my script, close Visual Studios, and open it back up. So if it's null, we're going to debug.log, log error, and we're going to go and say UI manager is null. And then here we can just return the underscore instance if it's not null. There we go. Save that. Don't forget to assign the instance to this class using void awake. So we'll say instance equals this, and we are done with the singleton portion. Now we have a restart function and a quit function that we're going to be calling from the UI components. So here we're going to have public void restart and public void quit. You can think of when you're creating functions like this, you can think of it as kind of like where it's just like a framework, right? It's like a blueprint. That's all a class is. It's just a blueprint. Here's the requirements, and now we have those functions. So we have the ability to access this class from anywhere, and we can call onto these public methods here, restart and quit. Now the functionality for restart includes what's known as scene management. So if you needed to figure out how to locate scene management, you can say how to restart scene in Unity. Google search that. All right, so how to restart scene in Unity. You'll see here there's some links. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that this right here, application.loadLevel, is deprecated. You should not be using that. There is now something called the scene management. And if we continue scrolling here, you can see here, restart current scene in Unity 5.0. Let's get to a later version. So how to restart scene in Unity 2017. How to fully reset a scene upon restart. And if we look here, we can see here that he's using something called scene manager.loadScene. So in order to get access to the scene manager, it's a namespace. So let's open up Unity Scripting API and look at Scene Manager. Scene Manager in Unity. You'll see here is the scripting API for it. And what we want to do is load a scene, and it's basically going to be the same scene that's open. So here we have a load scene here. And if we look at their scripting API, the example here, they have the Unity Engine Scene Management, which is a library that gives you access to actually load this scene. And then here, Scene Manager.load scene, the name of the scene, and then you can control how it's loaded in. So let's go ahead and create that. So here, using Unity Engine.scene management. From there, we'll hop into our restart code, and we're going to say scene manager.load scene. And then here, what scene do we want to load? We want to pass in a string here. You can see here, if you just hit your up and down arrow keys, you have 4 options. What we want to do is pass in the string of the name of our scene. So scene name. So what is the name of this scene? The name of this scene is main. So let's open up our code and type in main. Let's save this. And for our quit, we're basically going to do, I believe we can do application.quit. And you could find out this information as well from the Unity documentation or doing a Google search. All right, so we have application.quit to quit our application, and to load a scene, we're using scene manager.load scene main. So here's what we want to do. If we save and run this, it's probably going to error out when we call those methods. And the reason for that would be because we need to actually add this scene to the build settings. So to do that, you're going to go to File, Build Settings, and from there, you want to go ahead and select Add Open Scenes. And that's going to add the Great Fleece Scenes main. For these, you can not even worry about them. They're not highlighted. All right, so now that we've added the build to the build settings, all you have to do now is just X this out, and we're good to go. Save your scene, and the next video will hook everything up. Okay, so we have our UI manager, and what we want to do now is let's hop into our first cutscene that has a game over sequence. So the first one is going to be, if we open up our cutscenes object here, it's going to be the game over cutscene and the level complete cutscene. So let's open up the game over cutscene, and inside is the canvas, okay? And on this canvas, we have buttons. We have a restart button and a quit button, okay? So what we want to do here is if we look on the restart button, we can pass in functionality to it. So for the restart button, you see this on click here. We can tell it to actually communicate with our UI manager and call on to the restart function. So to do that, we're going to hit this plus icon, and it's going to look for a game object. We're going to pass in our UI manager. From there, it's going to give you a function dropdown. And what you can do is you can grab all of the public functionality from the UI manager. Now, right now, nothing is showing up here. And the reason for that is because I forgot to add the script. Select your UI manager and drag it onto the game object or move it over in the hierarchy or in the inspector. Once the script is attached, reselect the restart button. And here we'll add that plus again. We have the UI manager object. We drop down the function, and you'll see here's the UI manager. And it's automatically going to give you all of the publicly accessible information from our script. So here we have our restart function. And what's going to happen now is as soon as you click that button, that function in the restart code will get called. Similar, we want to grab the quit button here. Let's create a plus icon, drag in the UI manager, drop down to your UI manager, and select the quit option. Now when you select that button, the quit functionality will happen. In order for the quit functionality to happen, you actually have to have a build product. So just running in the editor, the application.quit does not work. It only works in actual builds that are for desktop and PC. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next one. So here is our game over cutscene. That one's good to go. Drop down your level complete cutscene, go into the canvas, select your restart button and your quit buttons. All right, restart button, hit the plus, UI manager, select your UI manager function and call restart when this is clicked. Do the same thing for the quit button. Plus icon, drag the UI manager, function UI manager, and call the quit method. Save your scene, and this will be a good time to commit. Hooked up UI manager, publish your changes, and let's test this out. So we'll go ahead and get caught by the security guards, and we'll see if our main menu works.
Oliver, I'm here.
Good. I hope you didn't. Darren, if you toss a coin in another location using the right mouse button, then the guards will be distracted, allowing you to sneak on by. Give it a shot. Oh man. Hang in there, Darren. We'll get you out, man. Hang in there, Darren. We'll get you out.
Alright, so here we go. I'm going to call my restart button. And there you go. The game restarts.
Oliver, I'm here.
Good.
Right, and we are good to go. So that is all we had to do from there. And in the next video, we are going to take a look at setting up our main menu. In this video, we're going to create the main menu for our game. What I'd like you to do is save your scene, and let's go into a new scene that's going to be just our main menu. New scene. Inside here, what we want to do is create UI, and let's get started by creating an image for our background. This will give us a canvas, and this canvas is going to be dedicated to our main menu. So here we go, we have our image. Let's rename this to background. And for the source image property, if you hop into your sprites folder, we actually have a main menu folder. Inside is the main menu background. Drag that to the image. From there, we can select preserve aspect, and let's go ahead and fill the screen with this. So what we want to do is make sure the anchor point here is set to stretch on all fours in the bottom right. 0 from the left, 0 from the top, bottom and right should be 0. And there you go. So this should fill your main menu. From here, we want to add a new image by right-clicking the canvas, UI, go to Image, and from there, we want to drag our title image into the source file. So title and drag into the source image. All right, let's rename this text to title image. Title image. Click preserve aspect ratio so it doesn't scale when it's stretched, or so it doesn't get stretched and fuzzy. From there, you want to also scale with all angles and set the position to 0 on the left, 0 to top, right and bottom should both be 0. The next thing we're going to add is the start and quit buttons. So right click your canvas, go to UI, and let's create a button. This is going to be our start button. And we want to position this in the red border. So let's go ahead and drag it down. Let's put it about right here. For the anchor point, let's set it to be the bottom right corner so that it's always going to have the same distance from the right corner no matter the scale of the game. And from there, what we can do is let's go ahead and hop into our text here, and let's change it to start. And let's go ahead and increase the font size of this to about 20, maybe about 30. Now, when I do font size of 30, you notice that you can't see the text. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that your horizontal overflow is set to overflow so that it doesn't wrap the text. And then the vertical overflow as well is going to be overflow, and that will bring it back. The next thing you want to do is if you try and make this even bigger, like 60, we can, all right? So having those settings are very important. The next thing we want to do, and I think 60 is actually not terrible. Let's go ahead and position this a bit where we want it. So right now the text here is to stretch, but so we want to take the start button, and let's go ahead and just move this a bit, say right here. So I'm going to change the text value to be about maybe 45, and I think that's pretty good. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my background image for the white is gone. So I'm going to select the start button, the color and set the alpha to 0 so that we just see the text. From there, the text is a little gray and hard to see. We want to make this a hard black. So let's go ahead and drag the slider to 255 on the alpha and 000 for everything else. And there we go. We have our start. What we can do now is we can duplicate the start button, call this quit button, and let's just position this over here. So we have start and we have quit. Change the text to quit, and there we go. This is our main menu. In the next video, we're going to look at how to animate this. I'll see you then. So currently, we have our main menu, and everything looks great. What would add more life to this main menu is if we were to animate it. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're actually going to create a animation sequence for this main menu. Now, the way I'm envisioning this is we will basically, and we can do this through timeline, we can also do this just through the animation editor, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to create a black fade to alpha. We're going to bring in the main menu. The main menu is already going to be there, and what I think we're going to do is we're going to take this title image and we're going to slide it in here. So for instance, what we're going to do is it's going to basically fade in and appear like that. And I think it's going to be really, really neat. So to get started with this, the first thing we want to do is let's set up our black fade to alpha. So to do that, we need a UI image. So right click UI image, and we're going to call this fade. From there, this is going to stretch, and it's going to take up the entire screen. So set the position top, left, right, and bottom to 0. From there, set this to black. The idea here is that we're going to animate the alpha so that the main menu appears, and following that will be the title. We'll go ahead and slide in. All right, and with the background music, I think it's going to be really, really neat. So here we go. So we're at 255 there. The next thing we want to do is let's disable this, and let's get our title in the position we want it. So I'm thinking it's going to come from the right, so kind of like zooming in there. So I think from here, and it's going to be alpha'd out. So for instance, it's going to look like this. As it's coming closer to the screen, it will fade in and have that nice movement. So we're going to go from basically 245 on the left to 0 is what we're going to be animating. So now that we have everything in place, we can go ahead and re-enable the fade here, and let's actually start animating this. So to begin, we can actually create a timeline editor for this. So just because we're not doing anything with cinematics and virtual cams doesn't mean we can't use timeline. Timeline on itself is a great animation tool for sequenced events, which is exactly what we have here. So what I want to do is I want to select the canvas, and let's create a new timeline and call this main menu. Let's go into our game asset. Let's go into our game, The Great Fleece, go to game, go to timeline, and let's create a new timeline and call this main menu timeline. Hit save. It's going to automatically add a playable director component and an animator on here. Now, we're not really animating anything yet on the canvas, although in this instance, it was set up appropriately because we will be animating the canvas object and its children. However, to keep consistent and so we have a clear start, remove the animator component and delete it in here. So let's first focus on the black fade. To do the black fade, we are going to open up our timeline editor by double-clicking this, and it should be here. If it's not, it would have popped up. And we want to add an animation track. So we're going to create an animation track. We're going to add our canvas here. If it doesn't have an animator, we'll create one. From there, what we can do is we can start recording, and on frame 0, we're going to open up our canvas here, select our fade, and we're going to create our first frame. To create the first frame, all we need to do here is just move the alpha, and it's going to create the first frame. So set that to 255. Let's say we're going to have a half a second fade in. So here at frame 30, that would be half a second. And if you want to see seconds, this gear icon, you can drop it down and choose seconds. From here, now that we are at the 30-second here, so this is going to be a half-second fade. At this point, we want to make sure that our alpha is set to 0. And if we play this back, we have a nice fade in. The next thing we want to make sure we do is on the first frame, this title image needs to be 245 from the left, and it needs to be faded out. So we need to set to 0. And then following that, what we can do is we can go to our next frame over here, which is the ½ second mark. And by that point, we want to bring in, I'd say, let it take maybe the full second. So it's going to take ½ second for it to actually appear. We're going to go ahead and set the left here to 0. And we're going to bring the alpha to full opaque. What that's going to do now is if we play this, you'll see here that we have our ½ second fade in and the Great Fleece title is coming in. That's going to be super neat when we have our background music playing. Okay, so I think that is everything. Let's go ahead and stop recording and let's play this. Make sure your playable director has play on awake. And you can collapse this a bit. Let's play it and see how it looks. Here we go, it's loading up. All right, so it's a little quick, very quick actually. So we may want to slow it down because this is actually only a 1 second animation. So how long of a process do we want this to actually take? We may want this to take maybe a little bit longer, like maybe 2-3 seconds. So with one of the things we can do here is on the animation track, if you double click it, it will bring up the dope sheet. And let's change the samples to be half the speed by setting it to 30. And if we play this, there we have a little bit more time. And if we set the samples to say maybe 5 seconds, that actually might be a lot cooler. And as you can see there, it's like slowly zooming in. So 5 seconds might be a bit too slow. But what I want you to do is I want you to find a sample rate you're happy with. So I'm going to try 10. We're going to fade in. And I think that actually looks really, really nice. So I'm happy with using 10 for my sample rate. And let's run this again and see how it looks. Here we go. Yeah, much happier with this. Okay, so we have our main menu animating. In the next video, we are going to add sound effects or background music. I'll see you then. In this video, we're going to add background music. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create on the canvas actually we can do this. Let's add an audio source. And from here, we have our audio clip where we're going to add the background music. If you go into your audio folder, we have music, we have main menu music. Add this to the main menu music, audio clip. From there, we want to make sure play on awake is on. You also want to turn loop on and set your volume level to whatever you feel is comfortable. If we save our scene, we can see that we never actually created a saved scene here. So let's go ahead and name this scene main_menu. Okay, save your scene again, run the game, and let's hear how it sounds. Here we go. Very cool. So I'm really happy with this. And the next thing that we want to do is basically make it so that we can actually click these start buttons. So in the next video, we're going to set up the functionality for this main menu to transition us to our game. In this challenge, we are going to create the main menu functionality. So to get started, go to your game folder, inside your scripts, and let's create a new C# script titled main menu. Now for best practice organization, we might want to create a new folder in here and call it menu. This is going to be scripts dedicated to our menu. From here, we can right click, create a C# script, and let's call it main menu. And place this on our canvas. Let it finish compiling. Drag it on the main menu or the canvas. And you'll see here at the bottom, it should have added that component. Okay, now that we have our main menu added, what you need to do is you need to create the functionality and hook it up to our canvas so that when you press the start method, it's going to take us to the game. And then when we create the quit method, it's going to quit application. All right. And you'll only be able to test the quit application if you actually build the game. So for now, just go ahead and create the functionality for both of these, and we'll continue on. Later, we're going to be incorporating a loading bar. So you want to make sure that you don't modify anything else in your main menu. Just create the functionality to, when we hit start, we're going to go to the main game. I'll see you then. In this challenge review, we're going to set up our main menu functionality. So we need these two functions. We have public void start game. So if we call this start, we don't necessarily want this because start is a predefined term by Unity that's automatically going to get called. We don't want that. So we actually have to call this start game. So we'll call this start game. And in here, we need to include using Unity Engine dot scene management. Okay. Now scene management is a library by Unity used to access the scene manager to load a new level. So we're going to say scene manager, and my Visual Studios here has stopped working, so I need to restart it. So because we have this namespace library, I can then type scene manager dot load scene, and I can pass in the name of the scene, which for us is main. So when I hit the start button, I'm going to load the main scene. From here, we need a quit method. So public void quit. Okay, so we have our public void quit, and inside here we're just going to say application.quit. All right, save this. Now what the next step is we need to hook it up to the canvas. So if you select your canvas, if you go into your start button, we need to know what happens when you click that button. We have this on click event. So when I click that start button, what's going to happen? We're going to hit that start function. So to do this, you need to click this little start button here, or this little plus button. It's going to ask for a game object. We want to pass it the game object that has our main menu script, which is our canvas. From here, we can pick a function, and we're going to select our main menu. And from there, we can choose quit or start game. Select start game, and do the same process on our quit button. Hit the plus icon, drag the game object that has our script, select our script, and choose the function quit. Save your scene, and let's test this out. All right, so there we go. And if I hit the start button, so I am clicking the start button, but nothing is happening. So if we look on the start button here, we can see that we have our UI sprite, we have our button, and it is calling our main menu start game, but it's not actually taking us there. And we have no errors either. So let's figure out why. Go ahead and stop your game. And to begin figuring out why this isn't working, the first thing you always want to do is add a debug.log message. So let's open up our main menu script. In here, we can go ahead and say start game, debug.log, start. Let's save this, head back into Unity. Let's run this again, and what we're interested in seeing here is if this code is actually getting executed. The next thing we want to check is it hooked up properly? Finally, what we want to do is we want to consider what could possibly be blocking this. So right now, I'm going to start the game, I'm hitting start, and nothing is happening. So let's double check that while the game is running, that our start button is actually hooked up properly. On our start button, we have our canvas, and we're selecting the start game function. So everything looks correct here. Now, what could actually be the cause of this? Well, if we look at some of the properties on here, for instance, let's look at the properties for the start button. You see here that we have an image component that has a source image, a color, a material, a raycast target, an image type, and a fill center. This raycast target variable allows us to actually select this object. If you select the fade object, which is technically rendered in front of everything, because if we wanted it to render behind the start button, you could just move it here, and now it's rendered behind the start button. However, it's actually rendered at the front of everything. And if we look, it has raycast target selected. If we deselect that and hit the start button, everything should work as planned. Basically, our image target was accepting raycast information. So to fix that, all we have to do is select our fade object here, turn raycast off, save your scene, and let's run this again. And you'll see here that our debug.log message prints out start. Now, one of the things you're going to notice about this game loading is it's going to take approximately anywhere between 10 to 20 seconds to actually load this scene. And the reason for that is because it's such a massive 3D environment that it takes time to process. So we are going to add a loading bar. So I'll see you guys in the next section. In this video, we're going to begin setting up our loading bar. So to get started, make sure you save your scene, and we're going to create a new scene dedicated to the loading bar. So create a new scene, and let's save this as loading screen. Now you'll see here that we have our main menu and our loading screen just in our project view. Let's go ahead and organize this within our game under our scenes. Drag both of them and place them in your scenes folder. Now we are in our loading scene. Let's go ahead and start building out the loading menu. If we open up our sprites, we have a win-lose menu, we have a main menu, and we have a loading screen folder. We're going to use these assets to build our main menu, or our loading screen. The first thing we need to do is create a canvas by going to UI, and let's create an image. This is going to be our background image. From there, we can set the anchor to fill the screen by stretching all fours, and then setting the left, top, and right and bottom all to 0. From here, let's swap out the source image with the main BG. There we go. So here is our loading bar, or our main background. From here, we're going to create the yellow bar. To do that, we're going to right-click our canvas, go to UI, and let's create another image. And let's call this progress bar. This is going to be our fill. So here we have an image called progress bar. Drag that in, and this is our progress bar. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and position this so that we can basically get it to fill within the red. So to do that, what we want to do is select our anchor, and let's position it to the far left of the screen by changing our anchor point to this middle left. From there, we can set the position to 0. And what's going to happen now is we can almost emulate the progress bar. So this is going to be very important. You want to make sure that your anchor is the middle left. From there, we can shrink it down, and we can position this by dragging it around the scene view to make sure it fits in here. We may want to see a little bit of the red on the top and bottom, just like this. So go ahead and position this appropriately in your scene. So we want this to be, I'd say about, you want to get the width to be at the very beginning here. And I'd say that looks pretty good. So on the left edge, I think it matches up perfectly. And the next thing we want to do is change, we want to bring it in more. So let's go ahead and just modify the width and position. So drag it in the inspector here in the scene view, and you can play around with it. So about right there is pretty good. So we have our loading bar here, and you want to make sure you go ahead and fill that in. And one of the things we want to do for this loading bar to create the loading bar effect is the image type. Right now, this is just a simple image type. Go ahead and drop this down and select filled. By doing that, we can actually now fill this image progress bar. Now, the reason why it's looking like sort of like a radial is because that's the fill method. Drop down the fill method, and we have horizontal, vertical, and different radials. Select horizontal, and you'll see here that now we can actually emulate this progress bar. Pretty cool, right? So through code, we're going to be getting the value of loading our assets and assigning it to this value. So the next thing we want to do is we have an overlay for our loading bar. So let's create a new image, call it UI image, and rename it to overlay. This overlay is just a red overlay that we're going to assign. So from here, red overlay, drag the source image, And let's go ahead and position this very similar to how we positioned our progress bar. So here we're going to shrink it down a bit, and let's get it inside here. All right, stretch it out, and you can see here this is what it's going to look like. And we can go ahead and make it the top and bottom portions. All right, so our progress bar is going to be looking like this. So we have our progress bar, and as we fill, it's going to look like that. It's going to be really, really cool. All right, so here is our progress bar. We are set up. Go ahead and save your scene. And in the next video, we are going to look at creating the functionality for this. In this video, we're going to look at the logic for how to create a loading progress bar. So what's really nice about this is that we can emulate this in the inspector, which means we know what properties we need to adjust. It's just a matter of knowing what to research on how to solve this. So if we select our progress bar, we have this fill amount. We need to get a handle onto this image and basically populate the fill amount based on the progress of loading in the actual game level. So in order to do that, we need to talk about something called asynchronous operations. Asynchronous operations allow you to basically do something in tandem with another program. So for example, we will go from our main menu to our load level menu. So here we go from main menu to loading screen, and while we're on the loading screen, what are we going to do? We're going to load the main scene, and when it's finished loading, then it will send us to that actual level. So one of the ways that we can do this is by using what's known asynchronous operations. So let's look up an asynchronous operation in Unity. Open up Google, and as soon as we start typing in async, you can see here that asynchronous operation Unity already pops up. So select that, and there's a scripting API for asynchronous operation. And you can see here asynchronous operation coroutine. You can yield unto a asynchronous operation coroutine or manually check whether it's done using isDone or progress using progress. So here, let's see here, allowing scene activation isDone has the operation finished. So basically while the operation hasn't finished, so if it's isDone is false, then you can see here we get progress. What's the operation's progress? Let's look at this. Operation progress, it's going to return an operation's progress. The return how close the operation is to finishing. It's between 0 and 1. Well, look what else is between 0 and 1. If we hop back into Unity, you can see here that our fill amount is between 0 and 1. So when it's at 1, we fully load the game. Let's reopen our script. Or let's go back to the scripting API. And also in here, we see an example. Start screen load scene. And when they call this load scene, what are they doing? They're waiting a frame, which is you would return null. From there, they're creating an async operation, and they're calling scene manager.load scene async. So this function specifically is allowing you to actually load a scene before going into it. So this is what we're going to want to use. And if we continue their operation here, you can see here that they're saying while loop. So while the asynchronous operation .isDone is false, because it has an exclamation point before it, what are they doing? They're grabbing a reference to their text. They're saying the loading progress equals whatever the progress is. And then here, they're checking to see if the progress is greater than or equal to 0.9. And then they're doing some other logic. So just off of what we see here, we know what the logic for this is and how we want to solve this. If we hop back into our code here, what we can do is we can create a new C# script dedicated to this process. So let's go into our game and close our scenes. Let's go into our scripts and let's add a new C# script to the menu, and let's call this loading. So here this is going to be load, let's call it load level. Okay, load level, and from there we want to attach this to the canvas of our loading screen. So here's our canvas, select it, and drag the load level script onto it once Unity is finished compiling. Give it just a moment here. Go ahead and open up the script. And from here, what we want to do is we need to create the logic for when to do this. So as soon as we actually get into the loading screen, we want to start that asynchronous operation, which is done through a coroutine. So here, call coroutine to load the next scene, to load the main scene. And then we can delete update. We're not going to be using it, but we are going to have a coroutine. So here we're going to have an enumerator, and let's call this load level async. And in here, what we want to do is we need to create an async operation. All right, we need to create an async operation, and that needs to be assigned to the scene we want to load. So assigned to the basically load scene async, which would be main. All right, so we saw that there's a method called load scene async using the scene manager. That's what you need to assign it to. And after you've done that, you need to check. So while the operation isn't finished, okay, while the operation isn't finished, what do we want to do? We want to take the progress bar. So you need a reference to the progress bar. So reference progress bar. You want to say the progress bar fill amount equals the operation's progress. When the operation progress gets to 100 or 1, it will automatically load the main scene. So because you're working in a while loop, you need to make sure it breathes, otherwise you'll crash your program. So you want to say just yield wait for end of frame. All right, that allows the program to breathe and you're not going to crash. So I'll see you guys in the challenge review. In this challenge review, we're going to create the progress bar. The first thing we need to do is reference the progress bar so that we can modify the fill amount. In order to do that, I need a reference to the image component, which is a part of the Unity Engine UI system. So using unityengine.ui, that's going to give us access to the image component, public image, and we'll call this progress bar. If we save this, we can hop into Unity and assign it in the inspector. However, we're getting an error on line 19 because in order for an enumerator to be valid, it has to have a yield statement in there. So add yield return null, just to satisfy the condition. Save this, head into Unity, select your canvas, and you'll see here that our load level script is compiling. And we can add our image progress bar to it. So once Unity is compiled, you're going to take your progress bar and drag it into the slot. Progress bar, progress bar. Okay, now that our script has a reference to the progress bar, we can now access this fill amount, and we can set it based on whatever the asynchronous operation status is. So let's go ahead and look at our pseudocode. And the next thing we need to do is we need to call this coroutine. So let's call start coroutine. Load level async. And you can name that coroutine whatever you want. I just chose to call it load level async. And now we need to create an asynchronous operation. So for an asynchronous operation here, and we need to assign that operation to what do we want to load in this operation. So to create a new asynchronous operation, we're going to do async operation. And it's an asynchronous operation coroutine. So we'll go ahead and type async operation, and we'll give it a name of operation. And we're going to assign it to a scene to load. So in order to do that, we need access to the scene management, which is using the Unity Engine.scene management. So from there, we can type scene manager dot load scene async. And you'll see here that if we select this, what does the tooltip say? Load scene async. And it's looking for a string scene name. We have 4 options here. So scene name is going to be main. So we are going to load asynchronously before, instead of having to go into the scene and wait for it to load, we're going to load it while we're in this scene, and it's going to be the main scene. So let's save this. Now we got to go to our while loop. So while the operation isn't finished, so I can say while, and the operation, which is our asynchronous operation, dot, and you can see here we have some properties. Is done is what we're looking for. Has the operation finished? Has the level finished loading? So while the operation dot is done equals false, what do we need to do? We need to progress bar fill amount equals the operation progress. So we're going to take our progress bar dot fill amount and we're going to set it equal to the operation dot progress. What's the operation's progress? Okay, let's save this. And next, last but not least, you want to make sure you are saying yield return new wait for end of frame. That's going to allow the program to breathe. We can delete the pseudocode, delete this yield return null statement. If we save this and test it out, we should be good to go. You may actually run into an error if you don't add this to your build settings. So go to File, Build Settings, and from here, we want to add our scenes. So if you open up your game folder, drop down your scenes, you can add the loading screen in. And you want to position them in the order that they are. So we have loading screen followed by the main menu. So here we can move the main menu up, the loading screen, and then the main. This really doesn't matter, but it's best practice to keep it consistent. So we're going to start on our main menu. We're going to load our loading screen, and then the loading screen is going to load our main level. Go ahead and X out of this. And you want to make sure that your main menu is sending you to the loading screen. So change it to scenemanager.loadScene to loading scene. What did we name that? We name this loading screen. So loading screen. Save this, head back into Unity, and let's test this out. Go to your main scene or your main menu scene and run the game. Alrighty, so I'm going to hit start. Here's our loading bar. And as soon as it finishes, we'll be placed into our game. And there you go.
Oliver, I'm here.
Good. I hope you didn't run into any trouble. Darren, you've made it into the grand foyer of the
And there you go, guys.
Auction house.
That wraps up our progress bar. I'll see you guys in the next video.